9 motor graders, from a 150 horsepower compact machine that trims subdivision streets to a 500 horsepower giant that carves roads across open pit mines. We start small and end with a blade 24 feet wide, wider than most highway lanes set 3 across. By the finish, you will know exactly why a grader's frame length and blade geometry matter as much as its horsepower. The Case 845 sits at the bottom of this size chart, and that is exactly why we start here. A motor grader's entire job comes down to one part, a long, angled blade called a moldboard, hung beneath the frame between the front axle and the cab. The 845 carries a 12-foot moldboard and turns 150 horsepower into fine, repeatable cuts on driveways, subdivision streets, and short farm roads, jobs where a machine 3 times its size would be clumsy overkill. Every larger grader on this list is really just this same idea, scaled up. Case builds the 845 around 150 horsepower diesel, light enough to trailer behind a standard highway tractor without a special hauling permit in most states. The moldboard spans 12 feet and can shift sideways, tilt, and rotate more than 360 degrees underneath the frame, which is what lets one grader cut a ditch on one pass and crown a road on the next without changing machines. Operating weight lands around 26,000 pounds, close to a tenth of the heaviest machine we reach by the end of this list. That ratio is the whole logic of the compact class. Enough moldboard to finish a surface correctly, little enough machine to move between small jobs every day. Look at the strip of steel bolted along the bottom edge of the moldboard. That is the cutting edge, not the blade itself, and it is the part that actually touches the road. Crews swap a worn edge in under an hour instead of replacing the whole moldboard, which is what keeps a small grader profitable on tight municipal contracts. The Caterpillar 120 carries a name that traces back to 1931, when Caterpillar's first auto patrol replaced horse-drawn and towed blades with a self-propelled grader that could crown and finish a road in one continuous pass. The modern 120 is the smallest machine in Caterpillar's full-size line, built for county road crews and contractors who need a genuine production-class blade rather than a compact one. It carries the same basic layout as every grader after it here. Engine and cab up front, moldboard slung under the belly, tandem wheels at the rear carrying most of the weight. A Cat C7.1 diesel rated near 160 horsepower drives the 120 through a 6-wheel base, the standard drivetrain layout for this class, before all-wheel drive becomes worth the extra cost. The moldboard runs 12 feet as standard and extends to 14 with a bolt-on section, letting one machine widen a rural road shoulder without swapping equipment. Operating weight comes in around 31,000 pounds, distributed so roughly 70% sits over the rear tandems, where downforce actually presses the blade into the ground. County crews run machines like this for decades, because a grader this size is simple enough for one mechanic to keep running without a dealer visit. End to end, the 120 runs about 8.5 meters, close to the length of a city bus, and stands just over 3 meters tall at the cab roof. It looks modest next to what is coming, but this exact footprint is what most people picture when someone says the word grader. All-wheel drive changes what a grader can do, and the John Deere 672G is built entirely around that idea. A standard 6-wheel grader relies on its rear tandems for traction, a problem on loose sand, wet clay, or snowpack where the front wheels just plow instead of steering. The 672G drives power to all 6 wheels, so it keeps cutting a straight, flat surface on ground that would leave a standard grader spinning and sliding sideways. Oilfield crews, pipeline contractors, and northern highway departments lean on machines like this specifically because the terrain refuses to cooperate. John Deere feeds the 672G with a PowerTech engine rated around 225 horsepower, a real step up from the standard class, because driving all 6 wheels at once costs power that a 6-wheel drive-only grader never spends. The moldboard grows to 14 feet, and operating weight climbs to roughly 44,500 pounds, most of it added specifically to keep traction under control on grades where a lighter machine would lose the front end. Deere built this class after watching standard graders get stuck or chained up on pipeline right-of-ways where paved access simply did not exist yet. The all-wheel drive system only engages when needed, keeping tire wear reasonable on the drier days. At 9.4 meters long and 3.5 meters tall, the 672G is noticeably heavier through the frame than the standard class machines before it, a difference visible in the reinforced front axle housing that carries the extra drivetrain. The Volvo G990 sits in the heavy-duty highway class, the tier of grader that state and national road agencies run on paved and semi-paved networks where uptime matters more than almost anything else. Volvo built its grader line around operator comfort and hydraulic precision, chasing the kind of repeatable, sub-inch grading accuracy that highway resurfacing work demands. This is not a machine bought for one job. Agencies run G990s on multi-year maintenance contracts, grading shoulders, mixing base material, and finishing gravel access roads across an entire region. A Volvo D13 diesel, rated around 280 horsepower, powers the G990, and its moldboard extends from 14 feet out to 16 for wide shoulder work. Operating weight sits close to 53,000 pounds, and Volvo distributes that mass through a longer wheelbase than the standard class, which matters, because a longer wheelbase smooths out bumps in the existing surface, instead of transferring every dip straight into the new grade. That single design choice is why a heavy-duty grader can leave a flatter finish than a lighter machine covering the exact same ground. Crews running these on European motorway shoulders can hold a grade tolerance measured in single centimeters over a full day's pass. The G990 stretches nearly 10 meters and stands 3.6 meters tall, roughly the height of a two-story building's first floor. Next to the compact grader that opened this list, it is already close to double the weight. The Caterpillar 14M3 introduces the feature that separates a large grader from everything smaller on this list, an articulated frame. Instead of steering only through the front wheels, the entire front half of the machine pivots at a joint behind the cab, letting the operator angle the frame independently of the blade. That means the 14M3 can crab sideways past a utility pole, a parked vehicle, or a curb line without ever losing its cutting angle on the road surface, something a rigid frame grader simply cannot do without stopping and repositioning. CAT pairs the articulated frame with a C15 engine rated around 325 horsepower, because steering a frame joint under load while pushing material demands more sustained power than a rigid machine of similar size. The moldboard extends to 16 feet, and operating weight reaches roughly 63,000 pounds, a jump that reflects the reinforced center pivot and the extra hydraulics needed to control it independently from the steering wheels. Contractors reshaping drainage ditches around existing infrastructure specifically request articulated machines like this one, because the alternative is stopping the grader every few meters to reposition around an obstacle a fixed frame cannot swing past. Fully extended, the 14M3 runs about 10.3 meters long and just under 3.7 meters tall. That is longer than most city buses, and it needs every bit of that length to keep the blade stable while the front frame pivots. Step onto an open pit mine, and the grader maintaining haul roads is almost certainly something like the Komatsu GD955-5. Mining class graders exist because haul road condition directly controls how fast 200-ton dump trucks can safely move ore, and a rutted or washboarded road destroys truck tires costing thousands of dollars each. Komatsu built the GD955-5 specifically for that job. Near constant operation, reshaping roads daily, or even multiple times per shift, as heavy trucks grind the surface back down almost as fast as the grader can finish it. A Komatsu SAA6D170E diesel, rated around 405 horsepower, drives the GD955-5, more than double the highway class machine earlier in this list, because a mining grader needs the reserve power to push accumulated material off a road in a single pass rather than several. The moldboard spans just over 16 feet, wide enough to reshape a full-haul road lane in one run, and operating weight reaches roughly 76,300 pounds. Mine operators typically run these machines around the clock in rotating shifts, because a haul road left ungraded for even half a day starts costing real money in tire wear and fuel burned fighting rolling resistance on every loaded truck that crosses it. End-to-end, the GD955-5 measures about 10.9 meters and stands nearly 4 meters tall at the cab. Parked next to a mining haul truck, it looks almost toy-sized, which says more about the truck than it does about the grader. XCMG built the GR5505 for a specific reality. China's infrastructure boom needed heavy graders faster than the established Western and Japanese brands could supply them, so XCMG scaled up its own line to fill that gap. The GR5505 now works highway projects, mine sites, and belt and road construction corridors across Asia, Africa, and South America, competing directly against Komatsu and Caterpillar machines in the same weight class on price and parts availability rather than raw novelty. The GR5505 runs on an engine rated around 430 horsepower, and its moldboard reaches 16 feet 4 inches, sized to match the mining and highway class machines it competes against rather than undercut them. Operating weight lands close to 80,000 pounds, and XCMG reinforced the frame specifically for the kind of continuous, multi-shift operation large infrastructure contracts demand, rather than occasional municipal use. What's most surprising about the GR5505 isn't its size. It's how quickly XCMG closed the gap in build quality that used to separate Chinese heavy equipment from the established mining-grade brands. At roughly 11.2 meters long and 4 meters tall, the GR5505 is already longer than most fire trucks. Only 2 machines in this entire lineup are still ahead of it. The Caterpillar 18M3 is the largest standard production grader Caterpillar sells, the machine mine operators reach for when even a mining class grader like the Komatsu, earlier on this list, cannot keep pace with the road damage. Ultra-class graders like this one exist almost exclusively on the largest surface mines and the biggest civil infrastructure projects, where haul roads carry trucks weighing more than a loaded jumbo jet, and a finished surface can degrade within hours. CAT rates the 18M3's C18 engine at roughly 465 horsepower, and the moldboard can be configured out to 18 feet for the widest mining haul roads. Operating weight climbs to around 88,000 pounds, nearly triple the John Deere all-wheel drive machine from earlier in this list. Here's the take that surprises people outside the industry. A machine this size is not overkill. It is closer to the minimum spec some of the world's largest mines will even consider, because anything smaller cannot reshape enough road surface between truck cycles to keep the haul network usable. The 18M3 stretches to about 11.6 meters and stands 4.1 meters tall at the cab, big enough that ground crews are trained never to approach it without radio contact with the operator first. Everything on this list has been leading to the Caterpillar 24, and it does not really belong on the same size chart as the machines before it. Caterpillar has built the 24 in small numbers since the mid-1990s, not as a scaled-up version of its standard M-series line, but as its own distinct platform, engineered for the handful of mines and government infrastructure projects on Earth, large enough to actually need it. A limited number exist worldwide, and most working examples spend their entire service life on a single mine site, because moving one anywhere else is its own logistical operation. A CAT 3412E engine rated at over 500 horsepower drives the 24, more power than some highway semi-trucks carry, and it needs every bit of it to push the blade through material at a scale nothing else on this list attempts. The moldboard spans 24 feet, wider than most highway lanes set side by side, and operating weight reaches roughly 200,000 pounds, a figure that puts the 24 closer to a loaded rail car than to any other grader ever built. We will say what most people in the industry already know. At this size, the 24 stops being a grader in the conventional sense and becomes closer to purpose-built mining infrastructure that happens to have a steering wheel. Nose to tail, the CAT 24 runs close to 15 meters and stands 4.6 meters tall, taller than a standard shipping container turned on its end. Every other machine in this lineup could park nose to tail inside its footprint, with room left over. Watch the moldboard itself, that 24-foot curved wall of steel slung beneath the frame. It takes a dedicated hydraulic system just to angle and tilt a blade this size, because moving that much steel through packed material generates forces no standard class grader's hydraulics were ever built to handle.